You're now recording.
Let me know when you're ready.
Oh, okay. Just a second. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Notice is hereby given that a joint workshop with the Town Council and the Community Development Corporation of the Town of Laguna Vista, Texas will be held Tuesday, the 14th day of May, 2019 at 7 o'clock p.m. in the City Hall Building at 122 Fernandez Street, Laguna Vista, Texas. Call to order 7:32. Alma?
Mayor Susie Houston.
Yes.
Councilmember Michael Carter.
Here.
Javon Howard is absent. Frank Davalos.
Here.
Rolando Gonzalez.
Here.
Victor Worrell.
Here.
And Nadine Smith.
And we have a motion from earlier, let's just use that. Can we still use that one for this, to excuse
Okay,
Javon?
so on my CDC member, Sid Ramos. Kathy B.
Here.
Kristen Howard.
Here.
Eddie Galvan. Michael Rims.
Here.
Christopher Romero.
Here.
And Terry Galloway.
Eddie was out of town.
Mr. Galvan is out of town.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 is CDC projects, discussion of potential projects to fund the CDC funds. CDC free for all,
Well,
that's all I have.
let me just say that as you started the discussion, I met with Mr. Losi, the LBRA president, and last week we talked about the accessibility improvements to the marina. And at that time, I mentioned, well, if the handicap improvements are gonna involve making improvements to, including a sidewalk, improvements to a boat slip, why don't we include other boat slips? I mean, if a contractor's gonna come do work, why don't we do additional work, and try to kill as many, birds with one stone? And so we talked about this workshop, and I believe he is giving you a report, and also I believe he also has some pictures, so for you to think about. And also another project that's gonna be coming up, at the meeting in a week, is potential funding, request for funding for a business that's gonna be, 2 businesses are gonna be opening catty corner from here. A 2-story building, a bar and grill, and a restaurant. They're gonna be hiring 8 people. And Mr. Harmon, the owner, had inquired about possibly asking for some funding for signage improvements. So I asked him, give him a copy of the application and said, you need to complete this, and the CDC board will be asking for additional information that they're gonna be interested in reviewing. But just to tell you that that's gonna be coming up. So, and I know the council wanted to call this workshop because they want to discuss projects between both, so.
Okay. On the
Go
fire,
ahead, Kathy, and then Mike.
on the fire department, right, we were talking about improvements on that. And, I went to look at the fire department and, it does need some help. And I went to see, Billy, the manager at Sutherland's, and he said that he would donate the tile for the flooring for upstairs for free. Of course, it's not gonna be something that they're gonna order, it's gonna be whatever they have on hand. And if he would give discounts on the new windows and, the flooring itself, whatever you have to have to put the floor down, and he would give up the maids to do that work. And then he wouldn't do the electrical stuff, but he would give a discount on the improvements for electrical supplies that needs to be done. Whenever you go, I don't know if you guys have been to the fire department, but when you go out and if it's dark, all of their supplies are against the wall with no lights. So it's extremely hard for them to find things in the dark. Yeah, so, because daytime is okay, but the nighttime, so he would not, he doesn't want to liable for that, but he said that he would give us discounts on all the supplies that are needed siding on the sides, the Hardy Point, he would give discounts on that too, so. So we just need to get him all the measurements, and I don't know if you guys know, but the windows in the fire department, whenever there's a wind, it actually moved, and this past week, one of them fell on someone's head. So, I think it's important that we give money for the improvements to the fire department. And I can find out this week for the sizes and stuff and get more of a total of how much it's gonna cost. But I really think it would still be under 7,000 probably, I'm guessing.
The one proposal that I handed you was for the painting and the hardy board, all the exterior painting and everything, and some trim repair to be done is 5,100.
That's gonna be on the agenda for the CDC board to consider taking action at the meeting on the 20th. What is it on the 20th?
On the 20th?
Yes, so that's an action item, along with the lights for the basketball court.
Because we already entered into the public notice period.
Absolutely.
For that one.
We notified the public via notice, 60-day waiting period, notification period. So that's gonna be on the agenda. The action you take, CDC board, will be on the agenda for the June meeting for the council to accept.
Mr. Carter had some,
Oh, go
he had
ahead.
his hand
Sorry.
raised, then you can talk about it.
Go ahead, I'll mention on there, doing the same idea, I'm in different.
Oh, I'm just, well, actually, I'd just like to hear it laid out exactly what qualifies for CDC funding. Just, so that we're all on the same page, we know exactly what we have to do to get a project funded by the CDC without breaking laws.
Sure. There's a laundry list of items spelled out in, that are eligible for funding for the 4B project. The main category of distinction are those that have to be secured by performance agreement that involves primary jobs, or that in some of the other projects, and those that don't. It's a pretty extensive list. I'm afraid I can't just recite off the top of my head. I can certainly, without spending any time at all, make sure that distribute a copy of documentation that will spell out each one, and so that you know whether or not a project would generally fall into an authorized category or not. Now, that being said, there is a certain amount of wiggle room in terms of getting a project to fall into an authorized category. A lot depends on how it's pitched and what the ultimate objective that the city or the CDC board defines for the project in order to fit one of those categories, rather than just a raw sort of examination of what the project is. And so, a lot of it will depend on the information that you receive from the applicant. That might have to be massaged with some continued back and forth with the applicant over what goals are needed to be met, whether or not it's a category that requires the satisfaction of that primary job requirement or not. Just so that it can be channeled into something that the city can legitimately say, grant its approval as being something that is eligible for 4B spending. So I know that there was a question about whether or not something related to the firehouse was eligible for expenditures. There are a lot of that. I initially indicated, and I had some concerns about just something that was merely couched as improvements to the fire station, as being something that would be eligible for. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't. We just need to basically analyze what our objective is there, and find an objective in that laundry list of eligible 4B projects that potential improvements might secure. Now, what I can say is it's probably not something that is going to require something like a performance agreement that guarantees that it meets a certain number of primary jobs being provided and maintained within the town. But it falls into one of the categories that could be, where the improvements could contribute to things like safety, things like tourism, things like arts and entertainment in the city, then that's the way that we would channel something like that. Not that it's an attempt to spend something that is required to be spent out of the town's general revenue, but it does have to be tied to something that would be an authorized expenditure under the act. That's gonna be basically my task, is to come up with a language that will allow you to justify the expenditure on something that, if we just couch it as a general improvement to city-owned infrastructure, might not by itself fall in that category. I mean, it's something, I mean, that would be the way that it would have to be pitched or have to be authorized, and we would have to ensure then that whatever we were expending the money on met that goal. Like, I think there was some discussion about the fact that there's a danger created by low lighting situations, flooring, that's good news in terms of, you know, it allowing us to channel proposed improvements into an area that would meet one of the requirements. And so, basically, that's the task that I'm gonna be performing for you in terms of making sure that what we spend it on and the purpose for it are something that will be authorized expenditure. And I will definitely get you the precise laundry list. I'm not gonna have to research it or draft it. I can just pull it off the computer, and I can make sure I can get it to the line list, or at least distributed a copy to everyone. That will give you there's something like 20-something items on the primary job category, and 8 or so in the non-primary job category. So my memory's not that good, but I will definitely make sure that everyone has access to that, so that you can identify just at a glance generally what kind of things are requirements.
Mr. Carter, are we ready?
Yeah. Does anyone know what our fund balance is?
265,000.
How much?
265,000.
265,000. And what's the budget for this year?
62,000.
62,000. And so far this year, we have about a 15% increase in sales tax revenue. So, just one of the
We've had an increase every year for the last
Exactly.
7 years.
And we haven't changed the budget in the last few years. So we do have an increase in revenue, just 7 million. I think that's more of a realistic type budget, yeah. And the fund balance is 200 and some odd thousand, so probably over 300 after this year, if we didn't spend anything, so.
What are we supposed for?
Or you've got cash in bank at 259. As of the 12th of April, it doesn't really specify.
Short-term liability. $260,000.
And the clinic gets about 30,000 a year of that money.
I think we're in the second year, third year, there's a 2-3 year agreement.
It's 5 years. So the first
But
year,
there's-
it was 6,000, and then from year 2 to 5, it's 7,500 quarterly. For those remaining 4 years.
And let me just say, Alan and I were talking about this, that for a project to move forward, and Alan can elaborate on this, it has to be a yes, yes. And so you have to recommend, and the council has to approve.
I'm glad you brought that up, so now the mayor may say something.
No, he was next. And then you're next.
Now, going back to what you were saying in terms of what in terms of potential possibility of improving, say for example, a marina or ADA
Right.
compliance. Where does that stand in terms of?
That falls under the public, the word is in there now, entertainment, the same category that a park or an amusement or something along those lines, that's the category that the marina falls into, allowing people who utilize it to enjoy the outdoors, to enjoy
CDC money
for that. That falls, without very much massaging at all, that definitely falls into a category that, at an objective glance, that's an authorized expenditure.
So that answers our question.
That answers the question.
So, about the marina, David is here to, because he's wonderful. I talked to him, I've done a lot of research, I've talked to the city inspector in Port Isabel, the city inspector in South Padre. They are not compliant. And you don't have to be compliant unless you spend $50,000 on a project at one time. But it's important to, if you're gonna do an improvement, to go along those lines, to make sure that you're gonna get there at some point, right? But they don't do it. They have, Port Isabel has a bathroom that's accessible, a parking spot, and they have the incline requirement, but that's it. And in South Padres, they've been there for so long that it would cost too much to do anything about it. So then I also talked to the Department of Wildlife, and I got hold of a lady that handles this, and she gave us a brochure, so you guys can read this if you want. But it talks in detail about how to become compliant. So, if David, you wanna
I'll be
talk?
back too. I got a handout here, just kinda to let you know, what we did last year, we extended the ramp and it spent, $18,700 on that, put in a map, and I think there's a description of it in there. Then we spent $2,200 rebuilding the fish cleaning bench and putting a roof on it, made it look a lot better. The LVRA, last year, we had a net of 13,000, that's our fixed costs minus our dues, minus our fixed costs, and that was the most we'd ever had, normally it's about 10 grand. So we have about 13,000 a year in income. And we have today, we have $47,000 in our account. And as a board, we've agreed to not go below $25,000 and spend, keep it as a rainy day fund, because there's no telling what could happen. And I had a couple of questions about insurance, about if there is any insurance like on the fence or any of that stuff. So anyway, that's for a later day. But anyway, there was a description of the mat and what we did. Then I met with Rolando and Rick, and here's the other thing is this report. That it was part of the lease, when we signed the lease, it was a condition report. And you know, the marina's old, it was built 1972, there's a long list of things that could be fixed or you know, but it's working, it's a working marina, it works. Anyway, I met with the Rick Guerrero and Eric, whatever his name is, from Megamorphosis, and it is so expensive. Nobody is a small entity like we are compliant with the ADA. It's just too expensive. What they estimated $25,000 for this little project that they had. We got some prices on the gate. Part of it's moved the gate. It has to be on a flat surface. Has to be either key or a card, you know, hydraulic or electric hydraulic open. You know, we're talking $12,000 to $15,000 for the gate, and then a sidewalk. Have to extend it for a slab for a fish cleaning bench that a wheelchair will slide under, so they can get fish guts all over their wheelchair, and you know, stuff that was stupid and ridiculous and expensive. And that guy said the same thing, he agreed. So anyway, my proposal is that in the corner of the drawing from Megamorphosis, this is an ADA compliant dock, and we have to have a dock by the ramp for loading and unloading, and then one dock for a handicapped person to tie their boat up. And those docks are 60 inches wide, and they have 1 inch per foot of grade. So to get down 2 feet, it's gonna have, to drop 2 feet, it's gonna have to be 24 feet long, the ramp. So and 5 feet wide. So but it is what it is. So, and according to Rick, I told him, we could just start when we made improvements to make sure they're ADA compliant. And if we stay under the $50,000 threshold of any one project, we don't, it doesn't have to be inspected. We need to make sure that it complies, but you don't get on the list of the accessibility commission list. You can go, and we're not the only one. He said most people are not completely compliant because it's too expensive. So,
Well, one of the things he said, told David and I was, and this guy's an ADA expert, that you don't have to do all these improvements at one time. As long as you have a plan that shows, I wanna do this, we're gonna do this first year, second year, third, that they'll be satisfied with that. That you have a plan of when you're planning to do all these improvements.
and so I know I'd heard the figure of $25,000. And $25,000 will really only build the dock, the ramp, the ADA accessible and compliant dock, because it's not a regular dock. And then it's gonna be too high, but it's gonna be compliant. It's gonna be at a low tide, like in the fall, we have low tides, that dock's gonna be 3 feet out of the water. What can we do? Nothing. Because we'd have to go 36 feet out, which would be out in the marina. So that would work. But anyway, what we were proposing, and the LVRA, is if y'all would pony up to 25,000, we would pony up the remainder and have those 2 additional docks that are marked in red right here. This is the ADA dock right here in the very corner. And then we would put 2 new docks. These docks are in poor condition, poor to horrible condition. These docks over here are in horrible condition. We re-bolted all these docks next to the launching ramp recently with stainless steel bolts, reattached them and made them safe. They're not safety, but they're safe. And so that's our deal. If y'all would, we'd like to get, if y'all pony up 25,000, the LVRA would pony up the rest and get a contract from a bonded, like Bryan Industrial Services or what's his name, Martinez. Morris, somebody that's bonded and have local people do it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I am still of the opinion that we have to set forth a list of priorities about fixing this marina. I don't think we should, I of course think it's important to give people access that struggles in many areas, of course. But what's the point of being ADA compliant but the boats won't get out of the marina? I think dredging it is a bigger importance. Every morning I sit there and boats are starting to get stuck right about here because it's not dredged properly. So what's the point if we have docks but boats won't get in and out? On a low tide down here, when boats try to take off, they're kicking out mud.
May I answer some of that?
Yeah, just maybe just one sec. There's some walls here further up that's about to fall down where the seawall looks really bad. So somebody could fall in there. So I'm just thinking we should look at some, personally, just interjecting, I'm like, we should consider a list of priorities of things that should be fixed before we, because what's the point if boats won't even get in and out? They're starting to get stuck. I don't know if we've noticed that before, but you have a smaller one. The bigger boats are getting stuck right here pretty bad lately. So I'm thinking, just.
Man, I'd like to say that, we could spend $1.5 million down there and not finish up. Those permits are a complicated thing. The state, if we get a grant to dredge into into the marina, then it becomes a public marina. Parks and Wildlife may could get a grant to dredge the channel down Beach Boulevard, and we could figure out how to do the other. But as far as the bulkheading, and, I mean, we got what we got. We have a 50-year-old marina, and it needs a ton of work. If you look on that thing with the contract that came with the lease agreement, there's a big list of items that need to be fixed, or they could be fixed.
Yes, no, I understand that, and I agree with that. I think there's plenty of things we can probably fix. I still just feel like it's more of this, before we get ADA compliant,
We're not gonna be ADA compliant.
there we go, there's other things I think that's more important, you know. And whatever you think is the most important, of course, is what I think we should support.
I
What
think
is
we
your
need
first
new docks
priority?
to make it safe.
Okay. And then what would you suggest next? So the
Fix
docks
the
first?
ramp.
The ramp, okay.
The ramp is undermined.
But didn't you do that last time? Just an
That's an
extension.
extension on the ramp. The ramp used to have a 2-foot drop off at the end of it.
Not anymore.
Not
Okay, so
anymore.
your first priority would be to fix the docks, then you fix the ramp, correct?
Yeah.
And then what?
I mean, then any number of things. There's a list of 30 items. I mean,
Well, I'm just trying to see the priority, because I personally would rather find them in your order of
well, I mean,
priority.
then we need to do more docks as a membership. We got 160 plus members. People are gonna be, we're gonna need more and more dock space. And the docks are falling down. They're very poor. Most of them are original, except the docks between the, going north from the launching, everything else is original. So those bonds are 50 years old. They're like toothpicks underwater.
So you're saying if you give 25,000 and we give
Now, you give
25,000, you guys
25,000,
give?
and we'll give whatever it takes to make up the contract.
And then you'll do first the docks, right? What
Right.
did you say, sorry?
Yeah, the docks.
Okay.
What, it's in red right here. That's how I'm proposing.
These two, or all of it?
No, just these 2 docks, and then this would be an ADA compliant.
So it's on the agenda for the CDC board to take action on the 25,000 at next week's meeting, and then it goes to the council in June.
How much would the ramp cost, you said?
We don't know. We're gonna have to core it. We're gonna have to drill some holes in it to see what's under it.
The notice came out May 2nd, so we can't do anything until July 2nd.
So what was that 60-day thing we dealt with last time?
May 2nd?
Yes, yeah, here's the
The
date.
notice on the 25,000? I mean, I'll clarify. I mean,
It's here. I brought it to someone to show you guys.
So it's 60 days from the date of publication.
we have to wait till July, meaning.
And I had the same ideas that you have. I don't think we should build a house and then decide to build a basement. You know, you can't do, so I trust what, David says about what has to come first. Because I don't know if you guys have been there.
I agree, and I think what you're saying here is the access, the people walking in and out and through the boat. And if they're disabled, how can we improve that? Yeah, the docks need to be safe,
Right,
primarily.
this first,
I
yeah.
mean, that's every single day use.
Right.
Some of the boats may be doing stuff, you know. Those of us that know about the bay, you know, we know that risk, and we know on a high tide it ain't gonna happen. On an extremely low tide, boats that are not shallow water like or something, I mean, we know. And this is also about doing this for the security and safety of the individuals on a daily basis versus a major project that right now we cannot. I mean, like, not even close to scraping the skin on the cost of that. And for the long-term future, in terms of maybe owners or something, might be the answer to that. That's kind of, and yeah.
just, from Tompkins Channel to Boardwalk, Harbor Masters off, that channel costs $365,000. To take that out with a drag line and a barge, kind of it was not a major dredging company. So dredging is super expensive. And then it's a permitting process, you have to have all that
Well, then
filled,
at least we're gonna
dry.
do the other stuff first, you know, if we can't afford that, I just thought that would be a priority, but if we can't afford it, we can't, you know. But then what's the next thing? So whatever you guys think, I think we should support that.
Yeah. I mean, as it falls down, we'll try to fix it.
Is the wall that you got
What's
on
the-
the side?
And, you know, there's people that do that line of work in terms of walls and stuff will tell you, you know, like you said, if you're gonna insure it, you're looking for top of the line materials and work. If you're just gonna temporarily make it look nicer, fix it, then you're not insuring it, it's not gonna last as long.
And that's a waste of money.
It could be, but maybe not. It could solve the big problem at least for another 10 or 15 years as we try to find ways to pay for the whole thing.
My belief is if you wanna do something, do it right the first time, because you don't have time to go back to it the second time. You know what I mean?
So we instruct, so what's next? What's my mistake?
No, we don't wanna talk about it.
Can I bring one more thing up? A totally different subject. Dog park, we were talking about, and there's lots of reasons not to have a dog park, lots of reasons to have a dog park, but here we have a lot of, gray-haired people, like, and they have dogs. And really would like to have some place where the dog can just run and stay safe. So now we have a lady who, she's in Eureka Springs, and she is going to send me more information on what it takes to get a dog park and the liability involved. She spearheaded the whole one there, it's beautiful. We don't have to do what she did, but I also went to, my dog runs, because she's a German Shepherd, so she has to run or she eats meat. But Harlingen is really nice, it's big and it's super nice, but Brownsville is better, in my opinion. It's not as big, but without what I've seen about their fencing, I would totally do what they did. Because dogs have dug inside, they can dig to get in, and, you know, so I would do something better, but just around maybe a concrete, you know, so they can't dig, or something that they put in the ground where they can't dig. But I really think a dog park would benefit our town.
Well, to have a dog park, we need a park, we need land,
Right.
we need more land. So it's more than just a dog park, so we're working on getting more land for more parks.
So
That's
do you think
truly a
that's-
priority for us.
I have this lady that can tell us a lot of information on our park, so.
Mr. Carter? Back to this. We've been advised about, I don't know how much I can say or not say, regarding the ADA compliant and being in the possible liability on the city. Can you address any?
Sure. Let me just point out, I wasn't familiar with this discussion on that you had on the $50,000 threshold or anything, but I will say that I think I know what you're talking about, and that assumes that the facility is grandfathered or that it doesn't otherwise have to comply with the ADA, which I talked a little bit about at the first meeting I attended. So there, again, I haven't done the investigation to determine whether or not that status exists. Assuming it exists, then yes, then the threshold would kick in as to whether or not the improvements you did would draw you into that situation. But in terms of a facility that does have to comply with the ADA, well, I mean, that's, the obligation is there. It's a federal law that applies to places of public accommodation. I know that there was some discussion at the last meeting I attended as to whether or not this counted. I believe it does. I know that access to it is somewhat restricted to dues paying members. I still think it probably not such that it would be something that if the ADA applies to it, with absence of grandfathering status, that it would still count as a place of public accommodation for the purposes of the ADA. And so the liability situation is not so much, and again, I think this goes back to the discussion we had before, not so much arising out of someone who might be disabled or need an ADA compliant facility and doesn't, and injures himself or herself. It's more a situation where someone comes along expecting to find an ADA compliant facility and doesn't, and then raises a claim based on that. That, by the way, is separate from the little bit we talked about, whether or not we get on the radar of a federal agency that is ensuring ADA compliant by spending a certain amount of money or by being a facility of a certain size. Those are two different things. The federal government has the ability to initiate that kind of corrective process on its own, separate from someone who might come along and be an individual plaintiff and say, I was denied access because of my disability and the lack of facilities that accommodate. Those are two, I guess, liability worries that the owner of the facility might have. So, if it's a facility that is required to be ADA compliant, and it's not, well, then that's a worry. That's potential liability for any facility. If it's required to be and it's not, then you have that. If it is not required to be because of some grandfathered status, then what you want to look at is making sure that you don't accidentally or inadvertently throw yourself into a compliance necessity situation by spending more money on the threshold or by doing a certain amount of improvements that reduce or eliminate your grandfather status. I haven't looked at the specifics of whether or not what's being proposed is going to kick you over that threshold, or whether or not the grandfathering status exists to begin with. I can say generally, institutional owners like a municipality want to be ADA compliant, just in addition to wanting to avoid liability. It's just the kind of thing that municipalities are interested in doing. So, it's not that I'm telling you as a policy function that should be your priority. Priority is whatever you decide it to be as a policy maker. That's one of the things that as a legal advisor to an owner, that I would have some concern about. I didn't want to make sure that we were either solidly grandfathered or we had done some kind of determination to ensure that making us ADA compliant would be so cost prohibitive as to not require us to. Without doing the legwork to find out that the answer to that question, you're free to set the policy and liability, potential liability of the ADA is one of the factors that will guide your policy decision. I hope I answered the question.
Well, I was just trying to help.
Oh, sure.
I was trying to help everybody else.
Sure.
To try to understand.
Right.
This
That's the situation.
It's more ambulance chasers that I'm worried about than anything else. So.
This would be the kind of ambulance chaser or civil rights type organization, that goes out and looks for these kind of things. I've represented cities that have been the target of these multiple complaints that all seem to come in at the same time from people who just so happen to be using the exact same facility at the same time, and all of a sudden come up with the same complaint, all represented by the same agency, the same nonprofit organization. And it becomes a hassle. It requires the cities to have to shift gear, divert resources from one thing they had planned to something else, make things priority that weren't priorities before those complaints come about. It's not a fun thing to have to deal with. So, to the extent that it's part of the plan to get ahead of that, that's certainly a good thing.
How would we know if we're grandfathered?
Well, there are a number of factors that go into it. The age of the facility, whether or not any work that will approach those anti-grandfathering thresholds have been done in the past, and when. The size of the facility, the number of people served. There's a laundry list of factors that go into that would all kind of comprise this individualized analysis, fact-specific analysis as to whether or not individual facilities are either having to comply or not. I say grandfathering as a sort of catch-all, but really that applies more to age than size or things like
If somebody,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
if somebody's gonna make a complaint, they have to be eligible to use the facility otherwise, right? Somebody can't come in here from McAllen and say, oh, I can't get my wheelchair down there. They have to be a resident of Rio Vista?
No, they would have to be, I mean, they couldn't be a trespasser, but if it's someone who is, let's say, I know that the members are allowed to bring guests
So
in.
if it was a
could
guest
be
or a member?
Yeah, it could be.
Or it has to be somebody that was legitimately there and couldn't make the access. It could be somebody driving by going, I don't see.
Well, unless they found themselves a way to get in legitimately, as a guest or as a temporary user, it could be, I know that residency is not one of the requirements. In other words, it could be a non-resident, it could be a non-resident of the state. Anyone who is legitimately needing to use the facility, who doesn't find the necessities that they're looking for, and they're required by the ADA is.
Yeah, the only way to get in there is to either be a resident or a guest.
And so there, the only reason why you don't have potential plaintiffs among the trespassers there is because they're physically unable to get in. So that's, I mean, it's not generally something you want to rely on as a hedge against compliance.
Right.
But yeah, you do have at least the ability to control who gets in. Doesn't by virtue of membership rules.
Well, I was gonna say, do you all have any suggestions for the CDC? Besides the free parking at the marina, the dog park, any marching orders?
Cardboard, I'd like to see a cardboard.
For the police?
That's been done by CDC.
Yeah,
To
for
protect
protection
the cars.
Some destroys the vehicles.
Yes,
Yes,
that's so
yes.
funny.
The improvement to the
Thank you for
building as it
remembering
were
that.
would be twofold as far as your investment, because then it's going to enhance the community as far as, we're going to take care of our school.
We're gonna take care of the vehicles that you guys pay for the city, I mean, it's a
All they're paying
no-brainer.
It's your tax dollars.
We all of it.
So, how much are you talking
I
about?
don't remember what it was.
It was
Rolando
like
can get that information
$35,000.
We had it something drawn up. We'll get it to you again.
Rolando will get that to you all for,
And that was one thing we had a problem before with past board members. We always wanted projects to be done, but we sent it to the CDC and then it was always denied. So here we had to put it back on, and it's becoming a problem that y'all are on you, so we're hoping that y'all can work with us and all of us work
For
together.
35,000, and how much money are you saving if there's damage to the
Exactly.
vehicles that
Right.
you guys pay, that we all pay for?
That's why
I
we
don't-
get so upset
No brainer.
when that happens and gets.
Sorry.
I'm
sorry.
That should be safety,
at one time, the cars had to be parked under the basketball court because it was bad weather not too long ago. Good, police
Okay.
carport,
Carport.
anything else that?
Can we put that on the agenda for?
Sure.
So, and I think maybe this helped clear out a little bit with you guys, so you can going to know what you were allowed to fund. And I think there was an issue there for a bit that you weren't sure if you were allowed to fund something or not, right? I think you mentioned that. So I hope this maybe helped clear out what you're allowed to fund. And if you ever have a question, contact Mr. Zuna and ask him, hey, we're not sure we're allowed to fund this, or I think he would stop us from already passing it to you guys,
One of
right?
the first things I'm gonna do is make sure everyone has access to that laundry list. And that's not intended to be a substitute for legal advice on individual projects, but it might be helpful for you to be able to, at a glance, look at something and understand the general categories of where things fall. So if an idea should come to you, or someone comes to you regularly and says, hey, I've got an idea for a project, you can at least sort of pigeonhole it initially before there's other discussion. By the way, quality of life, that's the phrase I couldn't remember.
Quality of life.
Blanking on
Yes.
quality of life.
Okay, in terms of funding for example, the beautification of the city, we had, for example, the butterfly flowering and the seeding, we're taking care of that, and then also with the trees. Is that potentially?
Yes, beautification is one of the categories.
For example,
Okay.
excuse me. Well, we just passed an ordinance and we accepted the Wolf Poinciana as our new tree or bush shrub. It was city official, and we're soon gonna buy several of them.
And
Just
then
letting you know.
the butterfly, what was it, those were vines?
Yeah, the Mexican flame vine. Yes, we should find some more, but maybe we can throw it your way.
I'm gonna call you in just a minute, but like I asked the town council, is there anything marching orders for you all? Is there any, would you be thinking, well, Terry and then Victor talks, is there anything, other ideas that you all have?
One thing that I see lacking, and I know we tried, is the entrance ways from L 100 to Mesquite and Palm. Some kind of enhancement there, because that's one of the first things that you're going to recognize when you're able to do something. You're not quite so far in stride, is coming through those entrance ways. And there is signage on Palm. I think there's, could be some development there, and with the fence line, to me, it's very lacking. And something at night, the visibility, the only thing you have going for you is the street lights up there, otherwise you're not able to see the entrance.
Landscaping the whole area is there?
Yeah, well, I was working on overlay and then with South Texas, with the South Texas Ecotourism Center, the TechStop's working on some lighting and some turnage and stuff. So Rolando's working on that. Victor's
So then, I know there's been some discussion of improvements over the walking trail with the birding portion of it.
Right.
Had citizens who wanted to talk about that.
There's some folks that I've talked to, because they've been out there and, you know, trying to improve certain areas of the trail, by adding another area for bird watching. And so, again, that would fall under, it's bringing in a lot of things, and it does every year, but it's beginning to grow even more, because there's been a couple of folks that take it upon themselves to volunteer and clean and set it up the way you're supposed to, so that then it does indeed attract birds of all sorts. And so there, again, I guess CDC will be good for that. And it's all about beautification.
extension of that trail
Extension.
back, there's even more than
Oh, yes.
maybe.
And I don't know if any of you are aware, but we passed an overlay, or starting to work on an overlay district, which is essentially works on the look of the city. So to create a cohesive looks and new on the commercial buildings, to work on signage, to work on the new plan that we're gonna put by the signage. And Mr. Medal actually, and Mr. Javon as well, is working on that, so that'll come eventually. We just need some money. We're working on money and how to do it, so it takes time, but we are working on those things.
Okay, those of you that haven't said anything to the CDC, do you all have any suggestions, anything? Do you guys take it in all?
I'm taking it all in, and I wanted to update, I was working with Phil Beatty, and we just got really busy, but we're still working on setting a date to do what we said at the city council meeting. Phil, yeah, was helping, yeah, he's,
Not Bill Bailey. Won't you come on?
but, so far, no, I'm liking everything I'm hearing. I've made a few notes on what I feel, is, maybe to work towards. Definitely, and you guys are still, you did the Monarch Pledge too, right?
Actually, I was supposed to speak Thursday afternoon at the TML conference,
Okay.
but we got, was it all in late?
But we did sign
stuff
it.
we were gonna talk about, Rebecca from Monarch Pledge. That's okay.
It's just, I know some of you talked about park improvements, I know some of you, keep in mind, we're currently conducting a survey. It's so important that you complete that survey, get everybody that you know, because when we update the master parks plan, it will be based on the results of the survey. So when you're talking about a trail expansion, it needs to be reflected in the survey. I know some people talk about updating the playground sets to make them accessible. In order for us to apply for grant funding, it needs to be reflected in the survey that the public wants upgrades to the playgrounds, the public wants expansion of trails, because if it's not in the survey, the results, we're not gonna be able to include that in the updated master plan to apply for grants. So it's so important, we have about 340 responses so far, so we want 1,000. So we want everybody to complete it.
You're gonna put that back on Facebook in the next week.
Yeah, I wanna resend it, and, you know, I'm trying to get the school district, working with the golf club, and, you know, we're willing to go speak to
Define the-
neighborhoods, anybody, we want people to complete it. It's so important.
Anything else, Doctor?
As we develop these master community plans for our town here, are we also thinking about how our community is integrating into similar initiatives within our region, such as the hike and bike trail network that's being incorporated throughout the Rio Grande Valley? The Texas paddling trail for kayak and water access, and how we can then tie into these active outdoor lifestyle things that are really critical to our community here. And I think allow our activities to have a broader impact. You know, if we build a trail, but it is linked to a much larger trail system, it ties us to the larger community around us as individuals.
Well, that's what, we're part of the active plan. As a matter of fact, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, been working with Brownsville to submit a flat grant, $14 million to do all the construction plans, environmental assessments from the trail from Los Fresnos all towards Port Isabel, going through 100, tying into our 23 acres, tying into Bahia Grande. So all that is being worked on. We're part of that.
That's great.
The only other comment that I have is, I guess I'm just primarily crisis motivated, and at my organization, we've formalized our H120 plans for every department in preparation for hurricane season, which is nipping at our heels. And with the bay in our backyard, it's an issue that comes up every year. And the sea hates a coward, and we all live here for a reason, and we're not gonna run away just because there's storms. But I think that communities that are heavily impacted by coastal flooding events and major hurricane disasters, that economic hit, that developmental hit that they take can be multi-years to recover and come back. And I think that that's something also, at least personally, that I think of with these plans for implementation of projects is, are we also prioritizing hardening our critical infrastructure for such events? I'd like to see improvements within our marine infrastructure, but are we gonna be able to build them to a capacity where they can withstand something that occurs? And even, you know, with the fire hall, the window issue is tied to that. But in looking at the windows for this building structure, for our police department, all of our first responders, I think that's something that should be considered as well. Because if we can have first responders in or immediately after a disaster, sometimes it's after the disaster that they're even more critical, and they're hampered in their response activities. That can really hamper recovery for our community.
Anybody else?
I do have the website for this, if you guys wanna look at it, read it, whatever.
Can look at it and follow.
We've exhausted our suggestions. So, we need, a council member needs to make a motion to adjourn. I make a motion to adjourn. Motion before made by Councilman Smith, and seconded by Councilman Davalos to adjourn at 8:25.
Mayor Houston,
Yes.
Councilmember Carter,
Yes.
Councilmember Davalos, Councilmember Gonzalez,
Yes.
Councilmember Worrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Motion passes. Thank you, CDC, for being here. Appreciate it, guys.